We're going to kick off our Filecoin Plus Notary Governance call. This happens every 2 weeks. We wanted to do one at the Filecoin Plus day specifically, so those of you that are here get to experience like what it looks like and the kind of conversation that we have on a bi-weekly basis. Of course, it's an open sort of call, so any of you, feel free to raise your hand, participate via chat. If you have any thoughts or ideas, feel free to share. We like to do these, like as I'd mentioned before, at like alternating times. So we don't always keep people awake at midnight at different parts of the world. But today's is at this time slot. So thanks for bearing with us. This is not the usual time slot that we do this call in. The agenda for today's Filecoin Plus Notary Governance call is to get an update on how data cap is flowing, discuss a couple of open issues, specifically discuss the topic of notary elections, and then have a conversation on any of the topics that are flagged. I'm going to do my best to do this one a little bit quicker. Like I'll try to keep this to roughly about 20-25 minutes. And then for those of you that are hanging around, we have one last talk from the famous ZX on Filecoin Plus as an economic lever for a more useful network. So pretty excited for that as well. So I want to make sure I give him enough space to share some of his ideas. Cool. So data cap flow. There were actually 11 allocations in the last week when I checked yesterday. Very busy week, and roughly 20 in the last 2 weeks through the GitHub repo. That's almost double from the prior 2-week period, resulting in like greater than 50 tebibytes of data cap being allocated via GitHub in the last week, which is awesome. 5 new applications came in, and 36 currently open applications for notaries to address are in the repo. That leaves us at the following distribution. So starting out with about 1950 tebibytes of data cap to begin with, 1390 of it is still with notaries. 560 of it has now been granted to clients, which represents just shy of 30% of all of the data cap. And from that, about 40% of that has been used by clients in deals with minors. And the current average time to data cap is roughly 4.5 days, almost 5 days. So yeah, that's the latest from Andrew's analysis from the textile side. Here is a quick snippet of last week versus this week in terms of manual tracking of time to data cap through GitHub issues. So you can see here for specific notaries what like the average days to grant is currently looking like. And again, like this is notaries who are like spending their extra time volunteering to serve the network. So we're super grateful for those of you that are there. This is not like an intent to call anybody out. The main thing I want to show here is that we're actually seeing a pretty nice downward trend across the board in how long it takes to get a grant. And that's awesome. Like clients are forever grateful for the time that you're making as a notary to ensure that their needs are met in a minimal friction experience on Filecoin. So thanks for the hard work that you're doing. We're going to continue tracking this as an effort to see ways in which we can optimize and make the experience better. This data should be seen more as like, where is there room to improve the tooling and the experience, both for clients and for notaries to make this process smoother, not as like you're slow or you're a fast notary. So yeah, if you, as Andrew had also mentioned in his talk, if you have ideas for ways that we can improve the processes and the standards in this program, it would be awesome to have that conversation. Cool. So with that, let's talk a little bit about issues, because there is a lot of interesting, fun stuff to talk about at today's call. For those of you that have been coming to the calls, you also hear me say this like every time, but that's because every notary governance call has some awesome and fun stuff to talk about. It's not my fault that we always have like really interesting things happening in this program. So without further ado, for the following issues, we are making progress on the implementation. So issue 109 was raised to add like an auto close bot to client applications that hadn't had any traction in 20 days. Previously, we were exploring adding this functionality to the Filecoin Plus bot that already exists. We have pivoted away from this and are using a standard GitHub Actions flow now for closing out stale issues. So you should see this starting this week or so. Issues that don't have any traction from clients or notaries in 20 days will automatically be closed out. This will not only clean up stale issues in the repo, but also serve as yet another notification to both notaries and clients to make sure that they are addressing applications that are coming in. Issue 104 was on the topic of adding like an anticipated response time and throughput for like client applications being sped up. Like in previous calls, we discussed like setting like a goal of being responsive within 3 or 5 days, more or less. And so I had PR'd, adding an expectation to the set of objectives and responsibilities for notary to say that you should try to be responsive within 3 days. Again, this is not like a hard and fast rule, but this is guidance that we have agreed on as a community. This is especially important for those of you that are here to consider joining as a notary, that like we are looking to find people and promote people that are able to be active on the network. And so part of that should also be like responding to clients as fast as possible. So I have a PR open. I didn't get any specific feedback on it. It's very simple. It just adds this verbiage to the set of objectives and expectations. So if anybody sees anything here that doesn't look right or doesn't look good, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll probably be merging that PR probably tomorrow, because I think it's been open for a couple of weeks for feedback, and so far it looks like people are generally okay with it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the topics that require a little bit more discussion. And so for those of you that have been coming to the calls, you're familiar with issue 94. For those that are new here today, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to what it is. The goal here was that there's a lot of projects that exist that are interested in using the Filecoin network that operate at a much larger scale than like what's available in Filecoin Plus, like the world of data cap today. So a good example is like, for example, Jonathan Doughton just presented on Starling. They have multiple petabytes of data that could be brought onto Filecoin, and granting them data cap would probably be a really good use case of data cap, because that's a legitimate use case for open, publicly viewable data set that is in some way helping Filecoin deliver on its mission to provide a storage layer for humanity. However, the total amount of data cap that was given to notaries was only like 1.92 petabytes, right? And that's obviously not going to be enough at the scale that we're looking at. And so this was an initial proposal from Julian, who is a notary, as well as Jonathan Victor, around finding a way in which we could create a path for clients that have exceptionally large data sets to like basically start applying for applications independently of the regular notary flow. And so like a client that has this large data set could apply for a large amount of data cap specific to that data set. And the way in which that would be dispensed is through a multi-sig notary, which would be assigned to that client, which would be a set of at least 7 notaries that are signing on to becoming signers on that multi-sig. And there would be like throttles in how quickly that data cap would actually be dispensed, and like a lot of transparency and clarity on how that client is planning to use that data cap. But that would result in a flow whereby we could start supporting much larger data sets through this like new multi-sig notary concept, where existing notaries can participate, and we can start introducing much more data cap sort of liquidity into the system. There are a couple of interesting challenges here. So just briefly walking you through what the flow looks like, and we can talk about some of the changes that I'd like to continue proposing. So the flow today is, we actually have another repo that we just stood up called like Filecoin Plus onboarding large data sets or something of the sort, with the intent that it would be tracked similarly to the client onboarding repo, but it would be different in that it's specifically for these particular kinds of applications. In this repo, a client would submit an application. So in the last governance call, we covered like what that application had and like the complexities of the application. So if you are around, or you were around for that, then check it out. If not, I would also recommend that you take a look at the recording for that call if you're interested in seeing what we discussed on it. But yeah, the flow effectively is that a client would fill out that application template, which is a rather extensive sort of application template, which would be an open application for anybody in the community and any notary to comment on and do due diligence on. And so the intent would be over a 2-week period. We as a community ask all the questions that are required for us to vet this data set and this client as something that we'd like to support in the Filecoin Plus community and ecosystem. And if the community is in agreement and 7 notaries have sort of opted into becoming signers, then we'll kick off the process of creating a multi-sig notary, basically, that like the root key holders will help establish, that can serve as like a dedicated like data cap requesting faucet for this particular client. There's also a need to have like a lead notary of a sort to which the issue will be assigned, that will manage like the primary sort of communication with the bot that will help with like assigning data cap to the client as well. That's more of like a figment of interaction on GitHub that some of you who are already notaries are familiar with. But obviously there'll be some like instructions in README for how we can make this work. the implementation team has been doing some pretty good work to make this possible. And so the intent would be that like a client would be able to request data cap from this faucet like as they need it. And the throttles that we had discussed at the previous governance call was that for the first, actually, let me just pull it up. So the throttles that we discussed last time were around having the first allocation being the lesser of 5% of the total data cap requested by that client for that data set, or half of what is expected to be used in a week. The second allocation would be the lesser of 10%, or what is to be used in a week. And then third allocation onwards would be the lesser of 20%, or what could be used in 2 weeks. And the intent here is like for each consequent allocation, a client has already used 90% of the previous allocation. And so we as a community will have like a good amount of visibility into what that client is attempting to do and get enough time to sort of validate that we're like that the client is actually doing what they claim they would, and we're happy to continue supporting them basically in this venture of getting like a large amount of data cap to solve that problem. And so as I mentioned, we have this, it's a private repo right now because we're doing a bunch of testing, but it's part of the project. This has like the brief sort of explanation on what this is and how it works. And so the intent is to get this in a shape that we are in agreement and this becomes public, hopefully in the coming days, so that we can start serving applications. And so I think the things that we need to discuss in order for that to happen are the following. The first is that like we had a great suggestion from Funbushi, the notary from Funbushi, thank you for that, to improve the actual application. So the draft sort of application that was proposed in here will probably have a couple of changes. I've taken the recommendations and think that at least these two should be integrated with the application. So I'll probably update the draft for that. And so thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. If any of you want to take a look at the application as well, please like head over to this issue. I can drop the link in the chat. But yeah, it would be good if let me get this to everyone. Cool. Yeah, it would be good if any of your ideas on like the data we'd like to collect from clients as part of this flow. The second thing would be introducing some more throttles. So if we think of this as like a mini effort or mini program and like an MVP of supporting large data sets, then we should also do this in a way that's safe, and we can set a checkpoint for ourselves to measure, like as a community, our own policies and our own learnings, and make sure that we're doing things in a way that like actually aligns with what we'd expected. And so I was actually going to propose that we do this in a way where we introduce an additional throttle, like one per data set, and then a total throttle for the program. So it's considering adding in, say, like a 5 petabyte limit per data set. So of course, a client could apply multiple times, but at least initially that would give us some amount of control on the rate at which data cap is being dispensed, and like prove out a bunch of these things without like being overly cautious or not cautious enough, effectively, to find the balance. And then adding in like a total throttle of about 50 petabytes, which would allow us to it would effectively be a forcing function that once like 50 petabytes has been distributed through this process, like we should have a conversation in a notary governance call where we say, here's how we think it went. Did it go well? What are the things that we can improve? What is the feedback that we're receiving from people? And how can we actually improve the process? And so, yeah, that's the second thing. And then the third thing I was going to propose today is that we had previously talked about this already, so this shouldn't be news, but the intent that of those 7 notaries, they should be distributed across like regions. We previously talked about having a notary from every region. I was instead going to propose that of those 7 notaries, they should span at least 3 regions. That's mostly because we don't have notaries in every single region today. I'm also looking at the continents of South America and Africa. If you've got any notaries that are interested, come on over. But yeah, as an effort to ensure that we're unblocked, I think we should sort of restructure this to span at least 3 regions first. Okay, talked a bunch. At this point is when I usually keep quiet and see if there's any opinions hanging around in the community. If anybody has any thoughts on this, I would love to hear them. Again, feel free to raise your hand or drop something in chat. I'm just going to pull up the chat and see if there's any interesting comments. The next steps for this one is that I think we should just make that repo like public as we continue to do testing, and it might be good to actually just open up applications, because anyway, we'd built in this construct of having multiple weeks to do due diligence on an application. And so assuming that we're generally on board with this, like I'll probably post these updates to like issue 94, see if there's any reactions in the next 24 or 48 hours, and ping a few of you in the Filecoin Plus channel to make sure we're like on the same page with the people that did have opinions on this in the past. And then based on that, we should probably open up applications. No action needs to happen on those applications other than just communication and due diligence. And so for the first next 2 weeks, hopefully that'll foster some good conversation. It might also result in us changing the applications and the information that we're collecting. And that's all good stuff as we work together to improve this flow. But yeah, this holds a lot of promise. Like I want to thank Julian and the other community members that have partnered on building this, because this is going to unblock a lot of larger projects from having to go through like the manual flow and having to reach out to multiple notaries, and then also will prevent notaries from running out of data cap as fast as possible, just because they found like a good client to support. Cool. Next up is this new issue that was filed this week by Landsat File 20. I don't know if you are in the room. If you are, can you raise your hand? Because we'd be more than happy to have you talk through it. If not, I can give a quick summary. And for those of you that are watching for the first time, oftentimes what happens here is that somebody has written an issue that they want to discuss and they're at the call, and then they're the ones that drive the discussion. So you don't have to be stuck listening to my voice the entire time.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I think, I mean, I fully agree with what you just said, and I think it's a very good proposal. I'm just wondering if we should, I think we should start with this, and in parallel, we should have another issue open for the audit piece, because with these large customers, we'll probably have to track and decide which tool we're going to use to track and share how the data cap has been spent, and how we could, because we will be multiple notaries, working on with the same client. I'm just wondering, how we should have a separate one, so how we track and how we audit. We know that we need to dry run some audit because nobody did that before. So maybe this could be the good occasion, but not to slow down the process. I think we should start with this and just open another one for this audit and tracking piece.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I'll probably write up a new issue based on that, and then Julian, you can put any ideas that you have on that. I have a few in terms of things that we should be auditing, and I think like Fileplus.info itself has become a lot more sophisticated based on the conversation Laura, the presentation that Laura just gave, and then the dashboard that I've been working on as well should help with some of those things. So probably using these in combination plus like new tooling that might need to be built is a good place to start. And that can be an ongoing thing, especially if we're running this more as like a scoped experiment. We probably have an opportunity to run it that way. Yeah, so that makes sense to me. I don't know if there's any other reactions or thoughts to that. One from Reba, which is post auditing, is the data set still public and retrievable by anyone? Yeah, that is a really good point. Part of this is to serve things that are open and retrievable. And so I think part of the audit flow will probably mean like either automated or manual attempts for retrieval. Julian, to your point, it might mean that like the lead notary tries to do a retrieval or find somebody in the community that can do a retrieval like once every week or a couple of weeks. There's also efforts to automate some of these things from different projects. And so we could probably leverage that as well. There's a question from Nelson. Are large data cap clients like Starling being assigned to a specific notary and getting priority for data cap? Great question. So today the flow is that a client, regardless of their size, would basically pick a notary and then apply to that notary. With this flow, if they're looking for a data cap amount that's greater than 500 PB and less than 5 PB, which is like, massive data set, basically, they would apply directly to the entire pool of notaries. And then the pool of notaries would pick like a subgroup effectively, or like 7 notaries would opt into being signers on a new address that would serve as like the dispensing point for data cap for that specific project. And so in a way, they would be getting priority and have like a specific notary for them, but it wouldn't be like an individual person. It would actually be a multi-sig address on chain. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, Nelson, please feel free to drop another question in chat and we can keep talking about it. Okay, I'm going to briefly cover this issue. And for those of you that have thoughts, like please also drop your thoughts in chat or head over to the issue number 119. The suggestion here was having a mechanism of removing data cap from a client and then potentially returning it back to the notary. So this is really interesting. We've talked about this in previous calls as well as a way of having retribution options for like audits and for disputes that are being filed. This proposal came from the Untitled file specifically to cover two scenarios. One in which a client loses the private keys for their address, so they're not actually able to use their data cap. And then the second, the case in which a client misuses data cap, and so as a result is not like worthy of the trust or using that data cap over time. And so in either case, we'd want to have like a mechanism whereby either the data, at least the data cap is removed from the client, and then in some cases we may want to bring it back to the notary as well, because in the case of like the private keys are lost, for example, you probably want the notary to be able to reallocate that data cap. So I did some digging into the ACTA implementation. It seems like there's no actual easy way to do this, but it can be done. And so if we as a community feel aligned that this is something we want to build out, then it'll probably require FIP and then working with the individual implementation teams, which we've done before and we'll probably do again. And so I would request that if you've got specific thoughts on this, head over to issue 119, drop a comment there. It would be great. With that, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about notary elections. So just so some of you are aware, in past notary elections, we had set a target of 3 notaries per region. And in the case that there were ties across notaries, we ended up increasing that for that region. So we ended up in a situation where North America and China had more than 3 notaries, but every other region had only 3 notaries. And then we also had a few notaries who stepped down from the time commitment. And so Europe was left with 2, for example. And so given that and the desire to have both more data cap and more activity and faster responsiveness to clients, I think as a community over the last weeks, we've agreed that like we want to increase the amount of notaries. So in the last call, I had proposed that we do 5, and we had some interesting conversation where I believe it was Emma from the Coda project who mentioned that it's better to anchor around the amount of data cap that we want to give rather than just the number. And I think that was echoed by Andrew and Megan and a couple others as well. And so I did some analysis. I've detailed this analysis in issue 117. Very extensive, lots of tables. If you're interested, please excuse me if I made any mistakes and please feel free to correct me. But the intent here was effectively to say, for the previous round of notary elections, like how is data cap actually allocated and how is it used? So how is it used across regions? How is it actually allocated? And what are the deltas between like how is allocated and how is granted? And so like, for example, like Europe ended up using 17 or receiving 17% of data cap, but only 11% was given to that region. So we probably want to ensure that more data cap is flowing into Europe. But yeah, based on that, I made an assumption that we're probably going to give like grant at least the amount that we had before. So say that we target like a total amount of 5 petabytes of data cap with notaries after this election cycle, just as an example. And we want to ensure that Europe has 20%, the Greater China region has at least 40%, North America has 20%, the rest of Asia also has 10%, and then hopefully we start to see presence in Africa, Oceania, and South America. I've had conversations with people, especially in Oceania, that are interested, so I know that we'll start to build more geographic distribution, which is awesome. But yeah, based on these numbers, if we were to just grab, like I want you to look at the first 4 columns here. If we were to grab like target data cap availability and look at the current existing data cap, then we get these numbers for like what we'd want to ensure gets allocated in this round of elections. And so based on this, what I propose is that we update the target notary count for North America, Europe, and the Greater China region to 5 notaries. And then we set a max notary count at 7 for any region. And so if the first set of notaries, which is 3 in any other region or 5 in these 3 regions, don't hit the actual like allocation number that we want in this last column, then we add additional notaries up to 7, or in an attempt to like meet this threshold. And in this way, we're both increasing the number of notaries, but not by like an overly substantive amount that the program goes out of control. But we're also ensuring that we get close to making the amount of data cap available that we want in individual regions. Again, I would flag that like clients from different regions have applied to notaries in other regions, and that's also a fine way to go. So this is not like a massive blocker in any way, but having this as a target seems to be something important that the community has voiced over the past few months. And so this is the direction I think we should go in. I would love to hear thoughts from existing notaries that had opinions on this as well before we proceed with next steps. Yeah. Hi.
Okay, I'm quite clear about the rules about the data caps. Sorry, for the notaries members, so including about the Greater China. So it means it will be increased another 2 notaries in Greater China. So totally will be 5.
At least, yeah. So at least
So,
5, if not up to 7. Yeah.
Yes, the maximum for the 7. So is there any information about our client would like to allocate it for big data cap? I mean, big, it means more than 100 TB.
So for that, I would refer to the discussion we were having on supporting like the large data sets with issue 94. So maybe what we need to do is discuss like bringing the definition of big down to 100 TB instead of 500. Do you find that there's a lot of clients that are at 100 TB or like at a few hundred TB, but not at 500? Or are most of them looking for more than 500? Okay, 500 sounds good. So for that, we will have this individual flow. And so if a notary qualifies to this round of individual like notary elections, they can participate on the multi-sig that would support that flow. And so for those clients, I would say they should go down this path. And then for clients that need less, like, single digit or double digit tebibytes of data cap, they would go through this set of 5 to 7 notaries. Yeah, so I think with that, like, we should probably open up applications. I think that, we've talked about this for a couple of months, and in the last call, it was basically that like the timeline was sort of +1 to say like May 11th onwards, we should open applications. So what that means is for those of you that are interested in being a notary, head over to this repo, open up a new issue and choose new notary application. That already has a template for everything that you need to fill out. You can look at closed applications to see examples of what that looks like. And so this will be like a 4 to 5 week process from here on out to elect like the next round of notaries. I do want to flag that if you're an existing notary and you want more data cap, then you do need to apply again. That was something we decided in a call about a month ago. But if you are an existing notary with data cap and you don't want a new allocation, then you can just continue as you're going. We'll probably take 2 weeks for the initial scoring, and then we'll have results being announced in the following notary governance call. So I'll post like a more official announcement as well in the Filecoin Plus channel, maybe later today, with any other updates based on things that I hear on GitHub or we see in Slack in the next couple of hours. But yeah, I think it's good. We should do this. We should get more stuff. I just want to say any additional thoughts, comments in the last couple of minutes before we hand this over to ZX? Julian?
Yes. So one question, Deep, about what you just said. So if we still have data cap, but just a few, do we have to do we have to reapply for this round to get more data cap, or we just have to first finish these the few TVs that we have before applying?
No, I don't think we should block on waiting to finish the 2 TB.
Okay.
That would also create a weird incentive, right? Where like notaries might rush out the door. So I don't think that's the case. I think the only complication that this may create is that because FIP, I believe it was FIP 12 that solved the data cap top up thing, that still hasn't been released in any of the implementations yet. I think that's intended to go out in June. So if that still hasn't released by the time the next round of notaries need to be confirmed, then all the existing notaries will probably need to get a second address notarized on chain. That's fine. I think that'll be a temporary problem.
Okay, cool. And another thing is, if we have, I'm very happy that we have more notaries, but I think we should ensure that we are all aligned. So do we plan to do like trainings for the notaries, so we just all apply the data caps the same way or something like this?
That's awesome. That's a great idea. I know that Andrew was thinking about this as well in terms of like onboarding notaries a little bit better and more easily. And Neo has some great ideas. Fenbushi has an awesome write-up. Dr. Ann had some good ideas as well. It might be good if in the next notary governance call, we spend some portion of the time discussing like how we want to improve notary onboarding, and maybe we can come up with a set of resources, or we can schedule a future notary governance call, or even like a separate meeting for like all the existing and new notaries to get together and talk about processes. I think we had another question in the chat.
So we got a question about the applying for the new data cap. So so we Fenbushi, so we actually had allocated I think 130 like terabyte of data cap, and the total of amount we have is like 1 terabyte, right? So like for right now, we actually want to like apply for for more data cap. The reason is that like for some of the clients we have talked about, they actually like want to have like more data cap. So that their like requirement may not be like over 500 terabyte. So their question is from like maybe from 100 terabyte to like 200, 300, which we think will be like so this kind of application for us we think is too big, because like for the previous guideline, like we have been like put on GitHubs, we set the maximum requirement application to be like a 50 terabyte, which is like 5% of the total data allocations. So if we want to like approve these certain kind of request from like 100 terabyte to 200, 300 terabyte, that would be like too much for us. So like for this new round of application, should we like apply for like more data cap based on though we still have like a lot of data cap remaining right now?
That's a really good question. So I would actually ask, like, for these clients that are at like 100 to 200 terabytes, do you think that they could come through this process of like supporting the larger data sets? Like, does that comply here? Like, is it all like open, massive, like publicly retrievable data? Because maybe the answer is that we change the threshold for using the large data set solution instead.
I think most of the cases won't apply for this. So like most of the company we talk about is like listed company. So they still have like lots of consideration on making the public data sets. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say in that case, like the correct path is you should probably apply again. We should probably have a conversation in the next governance call on like what the maximum amount of like data cap we want like outstanding with the notary is. So maybe instead of like another petabyte, we can discuss like if the right path based on what the community feels is like 500 terabytes, something like that. But I think you should apply again, and I think it's worth applying again and having the conversation.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think for now what we should do is we should start taking applications. Of course, like we've got like another governance call where we can discuss items here as well if needed towards the end of the applications in case we need to change anything. And of course, we've got the Phil Plus channels on Slack that we can have this conversation in. And so, yeah, Megan, if you think we're good with this, you can officially now state that the application should be open. And then I think we should wrap up and hand over to ZX. What do you?
Dear Filecoin Plus community, official notary elections are now open. Please apply.
Okay, with that, I think hopefully those of you got to experience sort of your first notary governance call, a little bit of a speed run, lots of fun topics. But yeah, come join us. It's pretty exciting. Lots of interesting things happening.